Marc Dann, welcome to Paper Napkin Wisdom. I'm excited to have you here today.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to participate.
So you shared a great paper napkin, which is a very personal one, I think.
Mhm.
And it says, "Get up, get dressed, and go to work. People are counting on you." Why did you share that with me?
Well, when I read the pitch to submit for this, I immediately thought of a situation that happened right after I resigned office as Ohio Attorney General back in May of 2008. Um, I I was a practicing lawyer up until I became Attorney General, and so and I represented a lot of clients in the community, including a guy that had a series of DUIs who happened to be a friend of my kids or a parent of one of my kids' friends, and so I got to know him socially as well as professionally. And he had a really difficult, hard life, and he never really kind of was able to get back on track. In fact, he died not long after. And I went to so back then people read newspapers on newsprint, and I had a place where I religiously went every morning to pick up my 5 or 6 newspapers a day that I would read, which I have a habit that I didn't think I didn't I didn't realize I didn't need to have anymore at that point in time. So I went to pick up my papers and my sweats and hoodie, and no offense today, but and with my hair uncombed, and I walked into the place, and he was there in his sweats and hoodie, buying a beer at 7 in the morning. And I went home after that, and I literally took a shower, shaved, got dressed professionally, and went and spent the day in a concentrated way, trying to figure out what I was going to do next. I left office with no plan. It was trying to take the pressure, a horrible pressure, off my family, and that I caused a situation where we had people at the end of our driveway, reporters at the end of our driveway for an extended period of time. There was nowhere I went where I wasn't questioned about what was going on, and I finally reached the conclusion that it made the most sense for my family and my ex-wife, who is now one of my best friends, but to resign and to take that pressure off of them. Um,
Yeah, so let's dial this back a
yeah,
little bit
yeah,
because I
yeah,
think people might not know the context. And so, Mark, you were Ohio State Attorney General at the time,
that's right.
and you resigned amidst some personal pressure
Mhm.
around, let's call it what it was. It was a scandal,
Yeah,
right? There was a scandal
yeah.
in your personal life
Hmm.
related to an
Hmm.
affair with us
Hmm.
with a member of your staff. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah, and as a result of that pressure, you pulled the chute. You got out of that environment to
Hmm.
take the pressure off of your family and, of course, off of yourself as
Right.
well. Um, that must have felt like, look, there was a scandal, there was a decision, there was a choice,
Right.
there were
Yeah.
challenges there, there was a
Yeah.
mistake. But in that moment, it must have felt really lonely.
Oh, incredibly so. Yes. I mean, I went from, my phone constantly ringing to, I don't think I received a single phone call that day. When you go through something like this, you find out who your real friends are. And many people who I've been in politics by that point by almost 30 years, both, as a staffer, as a volunteer, as an activist, as a contributor, as a fundraiser, as a state senator, and then as attorney general. And many of the people who I thought were my dearest friends turned out not to be my friends at that time. Since then, I've really made a conscious effort, whatever the circumstances, to reach out to anybody that I know that's going through something like that, because I remember every single call that I did get over that period of time. I remember every single note that I received, and there weren't many of them, so it wasn't hard to remember that. And I found that I'm Jewish, but I find that to be so we call it a mitzvah, that I could share with people based on my experience, and to say, look, I have no judgment. I am unrelated to the situation that you're in. I'm a lawyer, so we can have attorney-client privilege, which I'm happy to share with you. But if you just need somebody to talk to, call me and provide my phone number. There were other AGs over time that have resigned, lawyers who have been disciplined, friends that have been involved in criminal activity, people that I've known along the way, and I feel good about that. That's one of the things I've tried to do to try to make something positive out of what I went through. A little more context though on the resignation. So while the personal while the affair was a absolute horrible thing and very unfair and unkind to my wife and to my family, and to this really terrific young woman who went through this with me to some extent, it was the bigger problem was that when I got elected Attorney General, I didn't expect to get elected. There was also a Democratic governor elected at the same time. So there was a real a strain on finding talent to run the Attorney General's office has 1,500 employees. It's a very big operation, 500 lawyers. And to find managers, I was competing with the governor, who had much better jobs to offer. And the other Democrats won all but one of the row offices, so competing with all of them as well. And I ended up hiring a couple of my friends into jobs where they were over their head, and they made some terrible decisions that were in part sexual harassment related. So the scandal was really that. But in the course of that, my friends, of course, knew, because I had shared a place to stay with them. I was only in Columbus, very rarely overnight. I would commute back and forth because my kids were young to Youngstown, which is about 2.5-hour drive, as often as I could. So, but on the few nights I was there, I stayed with them, and they were aware of what was going on with her. And so when they became the subject of me having to ask them to resign or fire them, it was, I knew that this other issue would come out. And so I made the decision that I needed to come clean, first with my family, and then with the community. And I took a real stab at it. I did it's kind of a cliche now, but I did answer questions till they dropped news conference for 2.5 hours, fielding questions from reporters who were my dear friends. And one of the huge problems was I came in as a fiery reformer into office. My brand was truth. And so the people who had helped me get there, the reporters that relied on my honesty to expose serious corruption in state government, that got me in the position to be elected. When I stopped telling them the truth because I couldn't, it almost exacerbated everybody's vitriol and determination to show me that I deserve, and I deserved it. I mean, there's no question about it. Did that, flew to 3 editorial boards right after that, made my pitch, and it didn't work, didn't take. Sometimes that works, sometimes it didn't. Interestingly, in the context of politics in 2025, I think what happened I probably could have sustained it. I probably could have sustained it then. I had a thought that I could fire all the political people in the office, because they were the first ones to kind of turn on me when things went wrong. Because the career lawyers and the career law enforcement folks that work for the Ohio Attorney General were fabulous, and frankly, there was no need for the political layer, and simply just do my job and run the office. But for the family considerations, that's probably something I would have done. But even with resigning, the PTSD that my kids still suffer from all that is significant. I finally got them voting again, so I'm happy about that. And we have I feel I'm very lucky. I have three adult children, two grandchildren, and I think as good a relationship with them as anybody I know, and I love that. I mean that is the highlight and the most important thing in my life, other than my marriage. And so I'm fortunate that I was able to weather through that, but that took a minute,
Yeah,
obviously.
minutes. Uh,
Yeah.
so, Mark,
Yeah.
I want to thank you for giving people the context,
Mhm.
um, because I think it's important that people understand it. And and what I want people to understand is that while they may not relate, a lot of people listening may not relate to the situation and the conditions around the mistake that you made and the repercussions that you had to face and the way in which you face them. We've all been in situations where things like we've made a mistake, a big
Mhm.
freaking mistake,
Mhm.
and had to do something about it. And I think so the uncomfortable truth about it for a lot of us is in the discomfort we have a choice to grow or
Mhm.
settle,
Mhm.
right? I mean, when life gets
Or
hard,
become
yeah,
angry and
and
withdraw.
blame
Yeah, and
everybody
blame.
else for
Right.
taking
Right.
blame the people you put in place for taking you
Mhm.
down when you did the right thing.
Mhm.
That's
Mhm.
not what I heard from you. What I
Mhm.
heard is that you made a decision and then you had to own up to it, and you did it in a way that, as crappy as it was, given the number of alternatives in front of you, you felt it might be better for your family if you made other steps like resigning and
Mhm.
stepping out of it. So this humiliation is public because it's on TV, it's everywhere. But
Right.
some of us
Right.
face a quieter humiliation around some of the decisions we make. Only
Mhm.
a few people know about it.
Right.
Um, and I'm sure you've made some of those mistakes too. So
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
having made the quiet ones
Yeah.
and this really big one, is there a difference between them and how you feel? Like, I mean, I think this is I think it's a question, right? I mean, I'm
Mhm.
interested. What
Yeah.
do you think about that?
You know, so since I've been focusing on these things, that I've had this experience, and so I'm informed by. I don't think it was something that me as a young, ambitious politician and lawyer, aggressive, ambitious lawyer and politician, thought much about before this all happened. I thought a lot about it, obviously, since 2008. And I actually saw there was actually a story or a column in the New York Times yesterday that I shared with my wife. And one of the things I wish I knew from an 85-year-old saying things I wish I knew. One of them was people aren't thinking about you um, in the way
All the
that you
time.
think. Yeah, in the way that you think that they're thinking about it. Even for me in the public setting, I
Yeah.
can't tell you the number of times that I've attributed something that has gone wrong to the fact that somebody realized who I was and what my background was. And I'm fortunate because I represent individuals and consumers. I don't represent companies where this becomes a daily exercise. Um, but where it just wasn't true. I mean, it wasn't on anybody's mind at all. And I've learned later, and I'm sure there were many instances where I never learned that it wasn't on their mind, that I spent hours and time beating myself up about it, because people aren't necessarily thinking about me in the way that I think they're thinking about me, and that applies to all of us.
Right. So you're facing this, and I asked you this question about feeling alone because you brought up, and I think it's really important that people understand this. You brought up the possibly private humiliation that your friend was facing. He was dealing with an addiction problem, and you related to it in your very public situation. And this is what I mean, that the private
Yeah.
humiliation, the loneliness that people feel, I think is very much aligned with and similar to the public one that you felt in a lot of ways, because people have this feeling that everybody knows and everybody can feel
Right.
this and all that kind of stuff. Um, and so let's get back to your
Mhm.
napkin.
Yeah.
It sounds like a non-negotiable, right? Get up,
Yeah.
get dressed,
Mhm.
and go to work. Like those
Right.
are three serious non-negotiables. And you started with those very simple, basic steps.
Mhm.
And was that what you felt you needed to find yourself again?
Absolutely. I mean, I needed that. I'm not a rester. I'm not a sitter. I'm not somebody that, I'm a doer I always have been and remain. So, I mean, I start every day still at 4:30 in the morning, go to the gym, work for a few hours, have breakfast, and then go to the office and work until late, later into the evening. Fortunately, I've always been able to do something that I love. So I know that everybody doesn't have that advantage to be able to do. But and in my later years, I've become much more focused on building friendships and relationships and outside interests. I've taken up improv, which has been incredible fun. And I've learned a ton more about myself in that process. And I love that. I'm not terribly. I don't think you'll be seeing me on Saturday Night Live anytime soon, but I get through the performances in a way that, surprisingly, for all my public speaking experience, is horrifying. The worst fear that I probably ever, even going through this the fear of getting on stage without having a script is something people can learn a lot from. Anyway, but yeah, so I've always been, and so it wouldn't have been me to sit and watch. Now, I watched plenty of reruns of Law and Order in the time that, because at a certain point, there's only so many calls you can make. There's only so many emails you can send and resumes that you can send, especially when people aren't really responding to you. And so, so I did spend, much more time. I think there are 400 and some episodes of Law and Order. I don't know if they have that in Canada, but
Sure do.
yeah, it's, I watched an awful lot of them. For whatever reason, that was what was a comfort to me in the process. Um, and then but I went out and I started taking pro bono cases on. Um, I went to the local legal aid. So one of the things I had done as Attorney General, as you remember, 2008 was the beginning of the financial crisis, so I worked with the Chief Justice of the Ohio Supreme Court and the Ohio State Bar Association to establish what turned out to be the largest volunteer lawyer mobilization in the country to help people who were facing foreclosure. In Ohio, it's a judicial foreclosure process, so you're entitled to due. A new issue that people though shouldn't take for granted anymore, but you're entitled to due process of law and a hearing, and so I went to the program that I started, and I asked for a dozen files to work on, and they gave them to me, and I got to start. So I went to work. And I was fortunate at the time to become successful for a number of those folks. I don't think there was. I think there was one out of the 12 that ended up losing their house. We were able to help find solutions for them, which was helpful. And it gave me something to do. I hadn't practiced law at that level in a very long time, so it was very humbling. But at the same time, it was very, and I did it. So I was living at the time in Youngstown, Ohio, which is where my ex-wife's family was from and where we had raised our children up until then. And I knew that there were two places that I wouldn't even be able to do something like that. And one was Columbus, which is the state capital, and the other was Youngstown, where they have a very high density of news coverage. The highest rated shows in Youngstown are the news and talk radio and TV shows. And so I was very, very well known there. So I actually went to the Cleveland Legal Aid because I realized if I'm going to have a law practice, and I grew up in Cleveland, so there was connection there, but people were less focused on state government and less focused on me. And so that's where I went.
I so one of my beliefs. So I've had massive setbacks and when I've had them, my favorite brain candy was to get on a stationary bike and
Mhm.
watch all the Marvel and Star Wars library. There's tons of great popcorn there. Not popcorn for me. I was on the bike when I
Yeah,
was doing
right.
it, but it's amazing that some of us find those kinds of things. And I also feel like the best way when you've got no momentum in your life and you can't get any, I found for me a great way to build it is to give it away. And you did that.
Mhm.
You know, you did that on
That's right.
purpose and you found a
Mhm.
way to give it away on purpose by going to Cleveland. And it's interesting that you said that the doing the work itself was humbling,
Mhm.
right? But
Mhm.
it filled your bucket, didn't it?
Right. Oh, for sure. And it was also gratifying in many ways. I mean, it was,
Right? It's the
but
simple
I had to,
work that can be
right,
very
right.
gratifying.
Yeah, right, right. I mean, I didn't know how to do electronic filing because I had always had people that did that. I didn't know how to do, and that was newish at the time. And if it wasn't electronically filed, I had to go see the clerk of courts and face people that I thought might know me because they were all politically appointed, and it was in Cuyahoga County. Cleveland is a very Democratic county, and so those were Democratic activists that were across that counter when I showed up with the pleadings in court, and I had to make the copies. And fortunately, my mom made me take typing in middle school, and so I was good on a computer, too good actually, because a lot of the evidence of what happened with the relationship was in writing.
Yeah.
A lot of emails and a lot of text messages, and I think again, if you think back to 2008, we didn't really understand the kind of permanency of those communications.
Mm.
At the time, most people did. I didn't. Certainly, I certainly learned that the hard way. So I was able to use computers and adapt that way. But yeah, it was. But no, I'm so glad that it happened, and it really led to everything else that has happened since then.
So this is people are counting on you part.
Mhm.
What people are you talking about?
Well, my kids. So my son was a football player in high school. I think he was a sophomore. My daughter was in middle school. My oldest daughter had actually had she was my driver during the campaign. And I mean, so if you're a father of daughters, which I know you are, uh, right after she graduated from college, I spent a year in the car with my daughter.
Yeah.
Which was for me the
What
greatest
a
thing in the
gift.
world, probably the most worst nightmare of hers, but it was the greatest thing in the world for me, because in a campaign where there's all kinds of stress and just ups and downs, having somebody who I couldn't fire and couldn't fire me was really important in that context. And she and I just had this incredible bonding experience. So she had then gone to work for the Secretary of State um, uh, after I got elected over my objection because there was a look to it that wasn't ideal. Um, but the Secretary of State insisted, and Mia had just incredible skills. She was an artist, and graduated from University of Michigan School of Design, and then later from a graduate level program in that. But she went to work doing what she was good at, and so she was working in state government when this happened, and so she needed support, and because she wasn't going to work in state government for forever in that under those circumstances, and although I think she could have, but again, she didn't know what people were thinking as opposed to same scenario for her. And then my son, we had a plan. I Googled, and this is something I spent a lot of time on also as part of my get up and go to work part, but it's also people are counting on you. My son, we Googled good school, bad football. And we settled on a few schools where we thought at his level of play that it would give him an edge in getting in. Later on, I guess there was a scandal here where some guy got in trouble for like doing this for money. I was doing it for free, not just for him, but for his friends as well. And he ended up playing football at Georgetown, which was a great school, and I was very proud about that. But he was in his high school football, so we were focusing on he had expensive. He was not a natural athlete, so we had to pay for a running coach. I didn't know such a thing existed. We had to make sure that the kids had what they needed, so that their life wasn't disrupted any more than it would have been. So to be able to make sure that they were able to participate in activities, and while my ex-wife was working and had a small business that we had to start, because we didn't really realize. So when I got elected, I wasn't really expecting to win. I ran because I thought it'd be a great experience for me and for the kids, to see government and politics up close. And I was kind of the last Democrat over the line to win the election. And this is a true story. I sat in the living room that night with my father-in-law, who wouldn't let me move out of the house because he didn't believe that the results that were coming in were accurate. And my wife and the kids. And at that time, every member of the Senate got a copy of the Ohio Revised Code. And so at some point, my wife asked me, "Well, what does this job pay?" And I said, I have no idea. And so I went and pulled out the revised code, and for lawyers will know the pocket part where the updates were kept. And it turned out the job paid $109,000 a year. Now that's a great salary. That's a fair thing. But the combination of my state Senate salary and my part-time law practice yielded a lot more income than that. And so my ex, who was kind of as a lark selling Fiestaware pottery over the internet, the new internet, eBay, and those kinds of things, she ended up ramping that business up to help make up the difference. So she became, after Macy's, the second largest online retailer of Fiestaware for a while. Very, if you're going to sell something online, about the worst thing you can do is something that weighs as much as pottery. And so we spent a lot of time, but we had she had built a warehouse, and so there was that work to do. But we still lost my salary all at once, and so I had to cash in my pension. I had to go to the bank and humbly ask for forbearance on my mortgage, which is something, by the way, that now I can relate to. Many of my clients have had to go through the same thing. And so I'm able to share that experience with them. And then we went, and then I went, but I had to meet those obligations and first, and take care of the kids and make sure that they got what they needed. And one was done with college, but two were just getting ready to go. And so I was fortunate that I was ultimately able to make sure that everybody got their education and hand them off to none of them, fortunately or unfortunately for me, decided to go to law school, which I'd really hoped. I would have been happy to pay for that. Probably more happy than to pay for undergrad, but none of them decided to follow in those footsteps. But so that was the people to take care of. Food had to get on the table, all of that.
One of the things that I think is really interesting about your story, because when it feels like you took all of the learnings, all of the pain, all of the isolation, and have paid that forward in the work you're doing now for others. Having to go through the forbearance exercise with the banks, using that to help people both in legal aid in Cleveland to get started, but also in your consumer work that you do today. When you talk about being that person that people can call, it's not that you're giving forgiveness to people, but you're reminding people that they're not alone, and there's nothing wrong with that. There's a humanity. So you've taken. I believe that if we are truly going to learn from the hard things that happen to us, we must incorporate them in the gift that we give back, in the paying forward to society, to the community in some kind of way. And it feels like you've been deliberate about that. It feels like you've been intentional about that. And in so doing, many years later now, you've built a pretty successful practice. You've been able to start differently, not start new, but start differently, right?
Right. And I've been fortunate, and really, I mean, it is all informed by what I've been through and the clients that I was able to. A lawyer friend once told me long before this all happened that, to build a law practice, find something nobody wants to do and do it well. And so that was ringing in my head. He was one of the friends that stayed my friend after. Just a wonderful mentor that I had. He was actually owned a plane, and he was our pilot during the campaign. Ohio has an airport in all 88 counties, and so and part of my effort to be home as frequently as possible for the family. And Mike was trying to keep up his pilot's hours. It was a great combination. So we spent a ton of time, like with my daughter, we spent a ton of time together. He and I did. And he actually came to work for me in the AG's office, and he left when I left because he didn't want to be there, and I had the means to be able to do that. And oh my God, he was just so supportive of everything I did and tried to do. But for Mike Harshman, I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know.
So I want to recognize the emotion that you're showing right now because,
Yeah,
I've been there,
yeah,
and I think that um, when you've been alone, when you've been in those dark places,
mhm,
it doesn't take much to give you hope.
right,
Usually, just takes one person,
right,
and I think that it's easy for people to rebuild themselves and not be that person and look down at the person that's in trouble and disassociate from it because that's so painful.
right.
I think a lot of times for a lot of people they look back at that and they see the pain and they don't
Mhm,
see that they can help. They don't see that they don't want to relate to it anymore. And I think it's harder to reach back and be there and and be that person. I believe that we are our best when we are for others what we need for ourselves. And you needed someone like you. And
mhm.
it sounds like you're trying to be that for other people. Am I wrong?
I hope so. I mean, I really do. And again, I've been also, we talk in my office about doing well and doing good at the same time. And it's not hard as a lawyer. That's hard to do, really. It's hard to master. Many lawyers are very unhappy in their lives and in their work, and we only represent people that we feel like we want to represent. We have 600 clients at any given time, so we can fire any client that we want to if they mistreat a staff member or if somebody is somebody who we don't no longer believe in their cause. So I mean, I'm so lucky to be in that position, and so I get to do that professionally. And I've fortunately found a way to get paid for it too, which is great. And to share that, I mean, we have look, I have probably more lawyers working with me than other lawyers would do in this situation because I want to make sure their clients' needs are met, and I take less of a salary and a profit than I think others contemporaries do because we still do 25 pro bono cases at a time in our office as well. I mean, because again, it's like it's like you and the playoff beard. I don't want to. I'm superstitious. If I stop taking pro bono work, maybe the sky will fall again. And I hope it doesn't, but it could. And that's the other thing you have to know. And any time something could happen. There could be a situation with a client. There could be a situation, and I have lots of just like when I was attorney general, I have thousands or dozens of people signing my name to things that some of which I don't necessarily directly see. And so, for reasons out of my control, that things could go badly quickly.
So, Mark, I want to thank you for reaching out in the way that you did, because I mean, I think this is it's an appropriate conversation that we don't have often enough, and I want to commend you for being so transparent with me. And I want
Well,
to,
and I commend you for focusing on these types of things. I don't know how much of of your guests, but I'm sure there's a lot of people that are their wisdom was born of distress.
yeah. I mean, we love to talk about the successful lessons, but there's
Yeah,
far more to learn from the things that don't work out, and those are equally powerful if we let them be, and if we give
yeah,
people the space to learn. And look, the outcome is you've got a beautiful relationship with your three children,
mhm,
grandchildren. You've
mhm,
got you've recovered and have a beautiful relationship with your ex-wife, who
Yeah,
I'm
we
sure
spend
that wasn't a
holidays
straight path.
together
I'm
every
sure that
year.
wasn't a straight path either.
Right,
Um,
right. Even her husband and my wife, and we all spend holidays together every year. So
how
yeah,
wonderful, how wonderful.
yeah.
And so there is absolutely, if you're listening right now, there are lots of places to reach out for hope, but Marc's story should be one of them. One of the things we've been doing this year, Marc, is to honor a former friend of the show, a guest on the show in our first season. His name was John Ruhlin. He wrote a great book that transformed um, uh, his little corner of the universe with a book called Giftology. It became a bestseller. But before that, he was on our on Paper Napkin Wisdom, and his napkin was what you appreciate appreciates. And his point was love on, give gratitude on to people around you because they will appreciate and value not only to you but to the world. So to honor him, he suddenly passed away at a very young age earlier this year. And to honor him and to pay forward this notion of appreciation, we're asking all of our guests to shout out somebody, to lay some appreciation on somebody. Who would you like to appreciate today?
Well, I think I've already mentioned my friend Mike Harshman. I didn't quite until that moment recognize how important that was to me. And he really has been a great friend. My appreciations to my children, who have found a way to adapt to a very changed set of circumstances. We would go to the Browns game, in a loge, and suddenly we were going to the Browns game in the upper deck. So suddenly all of our life changed, very dramatically, and they were I made them a part of it, and so it made it all the more responsibility, and all the harder for them, when so they have been they've been strength for me, all three of them, in different ways. And I mean, obviously, like everybody, I love my grandchildren more, than them, and I appreciate them as well. But the fact that they stuck with me means a lot. And my ex-wife.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Um, Marc, thank you for sharing this time with me.
Thank you.